Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather on this 7th day of January 2022. I'm David Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. First graphic coming up here is hazardous weather, and we've got winter weather advisories for the eastern Arctic coast, southward across the eastern North Slope, southeastern Brooks Range, or across the eastern Brooks Range into the upper Yukon Valley, Koyukuk Valley down toward Tanana, and the greater Fairbanks area. Winter weather advisories for snow, blowing snow, winds gusting 50 miles an hour, and that kicks into effect later tonight, and or actually tonight, and stays out through Sunday night for winds gusting to 50 miles an hour, snow, blowing snow, or actually blowing snow. Don't look for much additional snow accumulation, but it'll just be those winds blowing snow around, reducing visibilities to half mile or less at times, and wind chills anywhere from 50 to 60 degrees below zero. And then the other location there, winter weather or wind chill advisory continues for Thompson Pass for tonight and tomorrow morning, Saturday morning. For wind chills 50-55 below with northeast winds gusting 50 to 60 miles an hour. And winter storm watch for heavy snow for the Panhandle, North Gulf Coast, Yakutat area, into the Haines, Juneau, Sitka, inside waters all the way down toward Dixon Entrance. That goes into effect Saturday afternoon and continues through Sunday. And that's for possible, 10 to 24 inches of snow possibly falling in that time period beginning tomorrow afternoon with the incoming moisture in the weather system. So pretty heavy snow possibility, not a warning yet, but it may develop into a warning. Right now just a watch. And satellite imagery showing some moisture off the southeast coast, kind of increase there. Upper level of pressure dropping southward into across the eastern interior. And that picking up some moisture as the cold air comes out over the northeast Pacific there. A little bit of light snow into the southern Panhandle today. Metlakatla carrying some light snow, but so far amounts have been quite light and just variable clouds elsewhere. Pretty gusty winds continue. Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, northern inner channels, gusting anywhere from 40 to 50 miles per hour. Through the northern inside waters, especially Lynn Canal there on down in toward the central inside waters. Much lighter winds down to the south. And winds on the increase again over the southeast interior. Manuska Valley, Palmer seeing winds gusting to 40 miles an hour again during the day today coming up. And also outflow winds, Copper River Delta, gust 50 miles an hour. Valdez had some pretty good wind gusts to 54 miles an hour in Valdez, and also out along the southwest coast. Tooksuk Bay seeing gusts northeast 50 miles an hour. So winds increasing over some areas as scheduled. Gamble, same thing. St. Lawrence Island, northern Bering Sea, northeast 41 miles an hour. Nome seeing gusts to about 30 miles an hour. And the wind continues to blow on the eastern Arctic coast there, Barter Island, catching gusts 40 to 50 miles an hour, actually coming down 30 to 40 miles an hour this afternoon. So a little bit lighter, due to a series of troughs that keep clipping the eastern Arctic coast there, tightening the gradient up as they pass with the high pressure holding. So each one that drops down tightens the gradient up enough as that high doesn't want to budge at all. And that keeps the winds and blowing snow conditions up there. Otherwise, gradient a little tighter than it was overnight or yesterday over the southern part of the state, especially the Copper River Basin areas and into the northern Panhandle. Otherwise, out to the west, very weak frontal boundary, bringing some very light rain showers to the eastern Aleutians and Adak and Atka, the main low center west of Shemya. And you'll see that pulls off to the west as the low to the south begins to pull northward. The frontal boundary there, that low to the south, brings an increasing chance of rain, a little bit of an increase in the winds for the Fox Islands later tonight as the low out west pulls westward. And the remnants of that front just hangs up over the eastern or the central Aleutians, Adak and Atka, and Shemya and Attu in kind of a break. Winds continue to increase across Copper River Basin, North Gulf Coast. Tighter gradient means more wind for the Lynn Canal Glacier Bay area, looking at storm force gusts starting to develop. But warmer air and moisture coming into the southern Panhandle, so snow trending toward mixed conditions late tonight possibly. Prince of Wales Island, but stays cold and dry with more wind over interior Alaska, with the wind weather advisories, as I mentioned, from the Alaska Range all the way northward to the eastern Arctic coast. And that trough keeps the wind and blowing snow going for the eastern Arctic coast, with lighter winds back to the west, especially under the ridge axis. And then offshore flow starting to pick up a little bit in the western Arctic coast with tightening gradient there. And the winds will continue through the Bering Strait, a little breezier for the Pribilofs, and northeast on Saturday, tomorrow. Colder air spilling out that will result in advancing the ice edge southwestward this weekend, a fair amount, as moisture continues to plague the central Aleutians. Periods of rain or showers, especially Adak and Atka, a little breezy there, but lighter winds and chance of rain for the western Aleutians. Rain or snow showers possible for the Alaska Peninsula tomorrow, increasing clouds, increasing chance of light snow along the North Gulf Coast throughout the day, maybe the southern Kenai Peninsula and southern Cook Inlet, Kamishak, Kachemak Bays. Late tomorrow afternoon, chance of snow. Moisture continues to push northward ahead of that warm front, with snow and blowing snow developing over the central and northern panhandle, with warming temperatures from south to north. Wind resulting in blowing snow over much of the central and eastern interior areas, right on down to the Copper River Basin. And moving ahead to the outlook for Sunday, snow and blowing snow. Again, push of moisture coming north of the eastern Alaska Range into the mid and upper Tanana Valley will bring much warmer temperatures and a chance of snow, but very windy conditions. You can see tight pressure gradients along and south of the Brooks Range into the interior. So blowing snow in those areas, gusts anywhere 40 to 60 miles an hour. Wind, storm force, storm warnings on the north coast of the Panhandle, eastern North Gulf Coast, east-southeast winds, again 50 knots, higher gusts, and quite windy over the inside waters as well, especially ahead of that frontal boundary. Warmer air riding in on those southeast winds, so that rain snow line will be pushing northward throughout the day into the northern Panhandle, as well as the North Gulf Coast, starting to look at mixed precipitation with much milder air coming up from the Pacific there as that low center pulls northward just east of Kodiak Island. Light winds, very cold temperatures, north slope in the Arctic coast, and northeast winds continue to pull cold air southward. Snowfall levels coming down to near sea level for the central Aleutians. Not quite for the Fox Islands, but definitely for the Pribilofs. Drying out, windy conditions, temperatures around zero for St. Lawrence Island. And looking at the temperatures, lows tonight near zero northern Panhandle, lower to mid-20s along the central and south coast, mid-20s Kodiak Island, upper 20s to mid-30s for the Alaska Peninsula, mid to upper 30s for the Aleutians, mid-20s for the Pribilofs, and west and north of the Alaska Range, well below zero, a little below zero, 5 to 25 below, depending on where you have the wind, south central Alaska, 30 to 40 below for the Copper River Basin, and 35 to 45 below for the eastern interior. Highs for tomorrow, below zero again, west and north of the Alaska Range, should come above zero, at least the forecast there, 5 to 15, south central Alaska near 20 for Homer, mid-30s Kodiak Island, upper 30s Alaska Peninsula near 40 in the central Aleutians, single numbers northern Panhandle to near 30, southern southeast coast, and well below zero over the northeast interior and the north slope. And then the lows, 25 to 40 below, eastern interior out to the Arctic coast, and below zero into Bristol Bay, mid-30s for Kodiak Island. We've got 20s for the Alaska Peninsula, and Sunday morning lows colder for the Pribilofs there, that cold air coming southward and southwestward, mid-teens, and the lows down to near freezing for the Fox Islands and lower 30s for the central Aleutians. And down close to zero again for the northern Panhandle, but a little milder. Lows in the upper 20s down to the south, 30 to 35 below for the Copper River Basin areas, and probably 35 to 45 below for the north slope. And then the highs for Sunday afternoon, staying again well below zero, north slope to the Arctic coast in that 20 to 35 below range, but milder. You can see not so far below zero for the eastern interior areas, but still below zero into the Copper River Basin. Lower to mid-40s now for the central and southern southeast coast, but staying colder to the north. Juneau 30, 18 toward Haines and Skagway. Lower 40s Kodiak Island, mid-20s for Homer, mid-30s for the Seward area, teens for the Bristol Bay area, near zero out over the west and southwest part of the state.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather graphic for Saturday morning. Marginal VFR central eastern North Slope and the Arctic coast. South of the Brooks Range, though, VFR all the way down into southern Cook Inlet, picking up some marginal VFR, Kamishak, Kachemak Bay, southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula, pushing into Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast. IFR now into the southern Panhandle, as well as the south shores of the Fox Islands to about Atka. Marginal VFR, southern Bering Sea, all the Aleutians, western Alaska Peninsula, otherwise VFR. And for the afternoon Saturday, marginal VFR for the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, most of Kodiak Island, some IFR for the western Aleutians, and Chitgout to Shimianatu. Also IFR, southern Panhandle, marginal VFR now all the way north to the border, Skagway, Yakutat, hanging up over southern Prince William Sound, and starting to creep northward along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range there in western Cook Inlet. Otherwise VFR in the interior, much of the northern central Bering Sea, North Slope and eastern Arctic coast, marginal VFR. And for Sunday morning, a little less marginal VFR for the eastern North Slope and the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, south of the mountains, good VFR, Chukchi Sea. All the way down through southern Alaska, marginal VFR, southern Cook Inlet again, and a little farther into the Kenai Peninsula, covering Prince William Sound, IFR, northward to about Yakutat into the north coast of the Panhandle, otherwise marginal VFR for the southeast coast. Another batch of IFR just clipping the Nikolsky, otherwise marginal conditions, western Alaska Peninsula to Shimianatu. And for Sunday afternoon, IFR now pushing northward into the Copper River Basin and to possibly as far west as Portage. Marginal VFR definitely to Girdwood, maybe down to about Indian or so into the Manduska Valley as well, becoming marginal VFR. So Sitna Valley staying VFR as well as northern Cook Inlet, but marginal VFR down into northeast Bristol Bay, the Aleutian Range, and some IFR for the eastern Aleutians. Marginal VFR and farther north in the Bering Sea now, all the way up to St. Matthew Island. VFR, Arctic Coast, North Slope, Brooks Range into the Yukon Flats. Marginal VFR, though, into the mid and upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country. And also IFR along the southeast coast. Passes, Anatuvik, VFR, except possible marginal VFR, north entrance. And same trend for Adigan, possible marginal VFR, north entrance, otherwise VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill, another VFR day coming up for Saturday. Rainy, same forecast, VFR throughout the day. Windy, VFR. Isabel, VFR. Edmund-Tasta, also VFR. Tanita, VFR. And Portage, VFR for one more day. And Chilkoot and White, starting out VFR, deteriorating conditions, marginal VFR, possibly as early as midday. And for the freezing levels, right across the Queen Charlotte's up into the Gulf of Alaska, south of the North Gulf Coast, east of Kodiak Island, cutting across False Pass and north of the Fox Islands, but quite a ways south of the Pribilofs. And as far as icing goes, we've got increasing icing over the southern Panhandle. Some of that become considerable moderate, possibly from Port Alexander down to Prince of Wales Island, Dixon Entrance, and increasing icing over the Gulf of Alaska, some of that reaching the coastline. Isolated moderate rime icing possibly reaching the coastline and the southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula into the Barren Islands, Kodiak Island. And icing along the Aleutians of just the isolated moderate variety, icing free everywhere else. Jet stream, cold upper low pulling southwestward, sets up tomorrow afternoon right over the western Alaska Range, and that's going to continue to pull southwestward into Sunday. Otherwise, northerly winds at mid-afternoon tomorrow, 65 knots, west coast through the Bering Strait from the Chukchi Sea, turn east 95 knots over the eastern Aleutians. Westerlies, 95 to 115 knots, blowing right in across the southeast coast. 9,000 feet, more of a southwest flow over the southern central panhandle of about 40 to 50 knots or so. And northerlies, 40 knots there as that low pressure area at 9,000 feet pulls southwestward there, but that'll be across Iliamna Lake, western Alaska Range, Kamishak Bay in those areas. Westerlies over the Barren Islands, easterlies 45 knots over the Bering Sea, approaching 50 knots for the Fox Islands. 3,000 feet, east wind 60 knots, western interior. And looking at turbulence, widespread moderate mechanical turbulence southeast coast into the Copper River Basin.
Why is plastic marine debris so common? We know there's trash in the ocean. Unfortunately, a lot of it is plastic. We find plastic everywhere, from the ocean floor to surface. The plastics are all shapes and sizes and all different types. We find plastics on beaches, and also inside animals' stomachs or wrapped around their bodies. That's bad news for our ocean and the animals that live in it and near it. It's also bad news for us. A recent study from the University of Georgia estimated that 8 million metric tons of plastic trash enters the ocean every year. That's like putting 5 bags filled with plastic on every foot of coastline in the world. That's a lot of plastic in the ocean, and it's there because, well, we put it there. The 5 most common items found during the International Coastal Cleanup are plastic cigarette butts, food wrappers, plastic beverage bottles, plastic bottle caps, and plastic straws and drink stirrers. Notice anything in common with those? It's a lot of single-use, disposable plastic. It goes without saying, we produce too much waste. That waste ends up in the ocean when we litter or don't recycle. Plastic is an important part of our modern lives. We use it for a lot of good things. But we need to take responsibility for how much we use every day and where it goes when we're done with it. The 3 R's can help, and it's up to every single one of us to practice them. Reduce your use of disposable plastic. That's anything you use once and throw away. Just use less. Reuse disposable plastics when possible. A plastic bottle makes a great coin piggy bank or watering can. The possibilities are endless. Recycle anything that can be recycled so it stays out of landfills, where trash can blow away. Ocean plastic is a huge problem that's only going to get worse. Unless we change our ways, we can do better for the ocean and for us. Why is plastic marine debris so common? We know there's trash in the ocean. Unfortunately, a lot of it is plastic. We find plastic everywhere, from the ocean floor to surface. The plastics are all shapes and sizes and all different types. We find plastics on beaches, and also inside animals' stomachs or wrapped around their bodies. That's bad news for our ocean and the animals that live in it and near it. It's also bad news for us. A recent study from the University of Georgia estimated that 8 million metric tons of plastic trash enters the ocean every year. That's like putting 5 bags filled with plastic on every foot of coastline in the world. That's a lot of plastic in the ocean, and it's there because, well, we put it there. The 5 most common items found during the International Coastal Cleanup are plastic cigarette butts, food wrappers, plastic beverage bottles, plastic bottle caps, and plastic straws and drink stirrers. Notice anything in common with those? It's a lot of single-use, disposable plastic. It goes without saying, we produce too much waste. That waste ends up in the ocean when we litter or don't recycle. Plastic is an important part of our modern lives. We use it for a lot of good things. But we need to take responsibility for how much we use every day and where it goes when we're done with it. The 3 R's can help, and it's up to every single one of us to practice them. Reduce your use of disposable plastic. That's anything you use once and throw away. Just use less. Reuse disposable plastics when possible. A plastic bottle makes a great coin piggy bank or watering can. The possibilities are endless. Recycle anything that can be recycled so it stays out of landfills, where trash can blow away. Ocean plastic is a huge problem that's only going to get worse. Unless we change our ways, we can do better for the ocean and for us.
What is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch? Well, first, let's talk about what it's not. It's not a floating island of trash like a garbage dump or a landfill. It's also not the only patch. They exist all throughout the ocean, and the Pacific Garbage Patch just happens to be the most famous. Garbage patches are large areas of marine debris concentration that are formed by rotating ocean currents called gyres, kind of like big whirlpools that suck things in. A garbage patch is made up of tiny plastic pieces called microplastics that are less than 5 millimeters long. It's more like pepper flakes swirling in a soup than something you can skim off the surface. You might come across some larger items like plastic bottles, but it's possible to sail through a garbage patch and not see anything. And they're a big problem for the ocean and us. People often ask why we can't just scoop up all the marine debris in the ocean. And the answer is, unfortunately, it's just not that simple. The first challenge is the sheer size of these garbage patches. They're huge. They're constantly moving with ocean currents. And there's debris from the ocean surface all the way down to the sea floor. Not to mention all the marine life we would disrupt if we tried to just scoop up debris. So what can we do? Well, the ultimate solution is prevention. And we need to keep that as our highest priority. We can reduce, reuse, and recycle to keep trash out of the ocean in the first place. And we can participate in things like shoreline cleanups. It's a lot easier to deal with debris before it gets to the ocean. Because until we stop marine debris at the source, we'll just be cleaning it up forever.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Strong winds continue. Lynn Canal, northern inner channels of the Panhandle. 40 tomorrow. Gale warnings 40, gusts 55 knots out of the north. Northerly gales to 35 knots for Stevens Passage, and small craft advisories for Clarence Strait. East winds 25 knots. For the south coast, east winds 30 to 35 knots, and east winds 30 to 40 knots on the north coast with seas 11 to 16 feet. Moving on to the day Sunday. And you'll see north winds continue, 45 knots for gale warnings over the northern inner channels. Gale warnings also for central and southern inside waters. Now Clarence Strait coming up to 40 knots out of the southeast, 35 knots for Stevens Passage. And storm warnings for the north coast, east-southeast, 50 knots, seas 27 to 28 feet, and southeast 45 knots for the south coast with 28-foot seas. Northern Cook Inlet, northeast winds 25 knots. Same thing for Prince William Sound. Gale warnings for the North Gulf Coast, east at 35 knots. East 40 knots for the Barren Islands. Kamishak Bay, storm warnings, northeast winds 50 knots, 15-foot seas. And gale warnings, Southern Cook Inlet, northeast at 45 knots with 11-foot seas. And moving on to Sunday, not much change. Cook Inlet, north of the Forelands, 25-knot brisk wind advisory level winds. Out of the northeast, 45-knot northeast winds continue for Southern Cook Inlet, turning north at 45 knots, Kamishak Bay. Storm warnings for the Barren Islands, northeast 50 knots, seas 20 feet. And storm warnings for the eastern North Gulf Coast, Middleton Island area, southeast 50 knots with 25-foot seas. And full gales in Prince William Sound, east 40 knots, seas 10 feet. And for Kodiak Island, east-northeast winds tomorrow, 30 to 35 knots, strongest in Shelikof Strait. And for Bristol Bay, all the way down to Cape Sarachev, looking at northeast winds at 30 knots. Gale warnings, Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula, northeast 35 knots. And for Sunday, Kodiak Island, north winds 45 knots, 16 to 20-foot seas. Gale warnings for the Alaska Peninsula, north to northeast 35 knots, north winds 35 knots for Bristol Bay. And for the Fox Islands tomorrow, northeast winds 45 knots, seas 15 to 18 feet. Gale warnings also for Adak and Atka, northeast winds 35 knots, seas around 15 feet. And small craft advisory for the Western Aleutians, northeast winds 25 to 30 knots. And for Sunday, from Shimia to Kiska, northeast winds 30 knots. Gale warnings for Amchitka Island, north 35 knots. Gale warnings also for the Adak-Atka area as well as Unmak Island, northeast 35 knots, seas 17 to 21 feet. On Alaska Island, small craft advisories, northeast winds 25 to 30 knots, seas 13 to 15 feet. Pribilofs tomorrow, northeast winds 40 knots. Gale warnings also for St. Matthew Island, northeast at 35 knots. Gale warnings also south of Nunivak Island, the southwest coast, northeast 35 knots. Brisk wind advisories, Yukon Delta Coast, St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound, all northeast at 30 knots. For Sunday, gale warnings for Norton Sound, northeast 35 knots. Gales also out for St. Lawrence Island, north at 35 knots. Brisk wind advisories for the southwest coast, north to northeast winds 30 knots. And for the Pribilofs, gale warnings, same thing for St. Matthew Island, both looking at northeast winds at 35 knots. Forecast for Sunday, seas around 14 feet. Moving up to the Arctic coast there, central and east central coast, north to northwest 15 knots, but still brisk wind advisories holding over toward Kaktovik, Barter Island, demarcation point west at 25 knots, and brisk wind advisories from Cape Beaufort to Wales, from Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson east 30 knots, Cape Thompson to Wales north at 30 knots. And then for Sunday, those winds come down from Wales to Cape Thompson, north coming down to 25 to 20 knots. Brisk wind advisories continue. Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, northeast 25, east 20 on the western Arctic coast. Light variable winds, central and eastern Arctic coast now for at 5 to 10 knots from varying directions. For tonight, cold high pressure over the north slope continues, and winds gradually increasing as the gradient tightens up across much of interior Alaska south of the Brooks Range, especially the southeast interior. Copper River Basin to the North Gulf Coast, maybe the Matanuska Valley, especially the northern Panhandle. Moisture moving into the southern Panhandle, increasing snowfall tonight. And for tomorrow, warmer air, snow changes to rain late for the southern Panhandle. Snow and blowing snow increase for the central and northern inside waters, and chance of snow increases for the North Gulf Coast, pushing northward on Sunday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.